I know that over the years, the company formerly known as TNA had done a lot of stupid things. We could get into them, but they've been talked about time and time again, and I'm with you, I'm on your side. But because of that, there's also a lot of lies out there as certain witches stir the pot and think, well, I can take advantage of this situation, and you shouldn't do that. It's not nice. If TNA was a child, you wouldn't steal his candy, so stop kicking it around its place. So to try and balance this all out, here's 10 things that everybody, 100% of people on the planet Earth, get wrong about total non-stop action. Number 10, TNA was just WWE's dumping ground. Yes, look, I know, I get it. Throughout the years, TNA did hire a bunch of guys that got fired from WWE and then just turned up over there. I mean, in 2010, they hired the Nasty Boys. I'm not going to stand here and justify it. Knobs and Sags certainly had their time, their era within the professional wrestling industry. But in 2010, it certainly was not. But what we're forgetting here, and what everybody is getting wrong, is that TNA also produced a bunch of homegrown talent who we are still enjoying today. I mean, Samoa Joe, who did cut his teeth in other promotions, absolutely came of age within TNA. AJ Styles was their first big breakout star, and it's where EC3 kicked all the ass. And he kicked so much ass, he went back to WWE, and they didn't know what to do with him, even though he had a ready-made character that took place in TNA. And also, some of the guys that did make the jump actually added something to the whole product. Christian Cage was an amazing world champion, and Team 3D went out of their way to put other teams over, such as Beer Money's. I'm not going to hear it anymore. Yes, did sometimes they hired people they shouldn't have done? Absolutely. But you've also got to look at the other side and go, all right, like the Fonz, eh? Number 9, the purpose of the X Division. Even Eric Bischoff on his podcast 83 Weeks has given this a kicking because he has said, I hated the X Division, what even was it? And then he compared it to the Cruiserweight Division in WCW. And I think he missed the point. Because the idea when it was first born was that it had no limits, meaning smaller guys could night-angle with bigger guys in an industry where mass monsters were absolutely the thing. So all of a sudden the playground had been changed, and as we know, as it evolved, it basically became one of the templates for what we now consider normal professional wrestling in terms of in-ring matches. So if you want to say that the X Division helped sow the seeds for the likes of NXT, for the likes of AEW, and who knows what else, I'm not going to argue with you. And when you do go back through some of the best matches that ever came out from that promotion, 9 times out of 10, they are indeed from the X Division. So stop being mean. Number 8, TNA never tried anything groundbreaking. I mean, I think if you say that, you've never actually watched TNA, because when it first came about in 2002, the first decision they made was, yeah, sure, we're going to have a TV show and we're going to air it weekly, but it's going to be on pay-per-view. Now, business-wise, that wasn't the best idea, but straight away, we're in uncharted territory. And they also had the 6-sided ring, and I know that divides people right down the middle, apart from AJ Styles, because his big selling point was, well, it's got 6 sides, thanks for AJ. I appreciate it. And you had the Ultimate X stipulation. And yeah, I get it. You can then throw back in my face, Simon, they did a reverse battle royal, which they did. If you've never watched TNA, it's exactly like it sounds. Everyone started on the outside of the ring, and you had to try and make your way into the ring. I mean, that died a death. But again, it's like Star Wars, you have to have balance, and I kind of feel like we don't. In short, they always tried to be creative in some sense, even if that creativity didn't always hit. But I appreciate effort, and they had effort up the 2-9. Number 7, the Knockouts division was flawless. Now, I'm being a little bit negative on this one because the TNA Knockouts division was absolutely brilliant, but you do get people that were massive fans of the company now going, well, you can say whatever you want, but the Knockouts division was the greatest thing ever and pretty much revolutionized women's wrestling. And it did go a long way to doing that, but probably All Japan Women's Wrestling came first. I'm just saying. My point is that now people will say, well, Charlotte may be great, and Becky may be great, and Ember Moon may be great, but they were nothing compared to these people, and that's not fair. I think once again, you have to look at the likes of Gail Kim and Awesome Congo. Man, you guys rock. But the people I just mentioned, they absolutely rock too. All that really matters is that Total Nonstop Action had the wherewithal to go, well, we shouldn't just be pushing guys because we're not living in the Stone Ages. So they certainly deserve a lot of credit, but let's not get too carried away. Number 6, the Impact, what it's become, isn't worthwhile. So many people tell me they aren't going to bother to watch Impact because it's just like a revised TNA, and this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, I will tell you this, if you find yourself with an hour or two to spare in the next 10 to 20 days, I don't know why I put that format on it, but I have, go and watch an episode of their weekly TV show, and I promise you, you'll be very impressed. It's very good. And if you heard the Revival or the Revolt or FTR, whatever the hell they're calling themselves now, on Talk Is Jericho recently, one of their teams they cited as someone they have to face now that they're out of WWE is the North. And have a guess where the North calls home? That's right, it's Impact Wrestling. So while there is this criticism that maybe it's not spectacular, I tell you what it is, it makes a lot of sense and it's really solid and the structure is brilliant, plus they have a roster that any other company in the world would die for. Not literally, no one's gonna blow their brains out, but look, check it out, trust me. Number 5, Vince Russo didn't do anything good for TNA. Vince Russo gets a rough ride in 2020, and I personally think a lot of the time he brings this on his own shoulders, but I'm not gonna stand here and take shots because that's not my style. But one big criticism is that when he did go to TNA, every single thing he did was just crap. Wasn't 100% crap. Because one thing that absolutely deserves praise is his invention known as the main event mafia, which took legends like Sting, Kurt Angle, Booker T, Scott Steiner, and actually gave them purpose in a modern wrestling environment. One of the best stories they ever did. And yes, eventually it did fall off a cliff because we kept changing members and really it just outstayed its welcome. But that's no different to something like the NWO. I'm not saying the main event mafia was as influential as the New World Order, but they both suffered the same fate. And one we hold up as the greatest thing ever, and the other is just kicked down the toilet. Let's stop doing it and let's give credit where it's due. Number 4, when Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff came in, they just killed it dead. When people now look back to 2009, when Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff did enter into TNA, the rhetoric usually goes like this. Everything was fine and dandy. Why did Dixie Carter have to change anything? In came the Immortal One, in came his friend, and then that was it. Our company was gone. The truth is, by that time, TNA had actually plateaued a little bit and maybe even hit a bit of a wall because it was doing decent numbers in the ratings. Impact was getting around 1 million viewers, but nobody there knew how to grow this, and they knew that if they were going to improve and they were going to have a future, they needed to expand, so they thought they'd take a risk. And sure, this didn't work out like they planned at all, but 2 years later, not only did you have the rise of Bully Ray, but you also had the Aces and Eights movement, which now, when you look back through the entire history of that company, is probably 2 of the best things they'd ever done. And guess who was at the top of the company? That's right, Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. And I'm not standing out here defending them, I'm just seeing it like it is. So my counterpoint is basically that maybe the company had peaked by the time that these 2 came in and quote unquote ruined it. Yeah, I will agree with you, we probably never should have done it. Number 3, they plan to kick WWE'S ass. If you go and find any time Eric Bischoff does talk about TNA, you may scratch your head a bit because he openly admits that 1, he didn't think much of the place before he got there, and 2, he never really thought that it was able to compete with WWE, which is why he laughs and he chuckles when he sees comments or he hears people saying, well, that's clearly what they wanted to do. Well, not in Eric's eyes. He didn't think there was a chance. So of course, straight away you'll go, well, if that is the case, why the hell did they go head to head on Monday nights with WWE Raw? And again, if we are trusting Bischoff at his word, and we may as well do, the plan wasn't to knock WWE off its perch, but it was just trying to, get a few new fans to watch the thing because like we said, the last entry, they were out of ideas and they needed something new. Now, this was a stupid idea, but again, I appreciate them trying. But what it does mean is that TNA was simply trying to up its own viewership as opposed to knock WWE down. They had to try something, they decided this was it, but I would also point out, once again, yes, that was a bad move. Number 2, that hiring Kurt Angle was a no-brainer. When TNA shocked the world in 2006 by hiring Kurt Angle, everyone was like, oh my gosh, this of course was a no-brainer. He had been a huge star in Vince McMahon's company and was probably the biggest person at that point to go from one to the other. And think of all the matches he was now able to have. Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle, AJ Styles versus Kurt Angle, Christopher Daniel versus Kurt Angle. All of a sudden, TNA was the place to be. For around about a week. But it certainly wasn't a no-brainer when it came to TNA management, because the whole reason the Olympic gold medalist had left World Wrestling Entertainment is because his personal life was in an actual horrible place. And they all knew this, and they had to sit down and decide, is it worth it? Do we take the risk? Ultimately, they decided that it was, but it was still a little bit touch and go. In fact, Angle was in such a bad place at this time, you can even go 2 ways with it. 1, TNA was daring to do this, or 2, TNA was a little bit irresponsible because that man needed to rest. I mean, it's all history now, but it gives you something to think about. Number 1, that the product ultimately failed. Right, I've got a list here of TV channels that TNA was on throughout the years. Get a load of this. It was on Fox Sports Net, it was on Urban American Television, it was on Spike, it was on Destination America, it was on Pop, it was on the Pursuit Channel, it was on Twitch, and it was on Access TV. I mean, that is kind of hard to keep up with now, isn't it? If you're a fan and you tune into Spike and then one day it's not there, are you going to go, oh, well, I better check out Pop? No, you're not, unless you're weird. And what I mean by this is that it's never really been a problem with a creative or the roster. I mean, the roster's always been good, but it's been management that's let the whole thing down. I mean, again, listen to the amount of television channels I just read out to you. That is a very, very odd thing to do, or at least an unplanned one. So it wasn't the product and it wasn't the people in the ring, it just came down to those pulling the strings that didn't really have a clue. But I'm happy to say that in June 2020, that seems to have turned around now. And the management is absolutely excellent, they're smart, they're putting on a good show. Once again, do me a favor, your boy Simon, go and check it out. Know of any other things that everybody gets wrong about TNA? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Then head to whatculture.com, read yourself some articles, follow What Culture on Twitter, What Culture WWE, breathe oxygen into your lungs, and then watch more videos here on What Culture Wrestling. My name is Simon from What Culture. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll tell you this, I'll tell you straight, I've always been a fan somewhat of TNA. I used to think they did cool things, and now it's better than ever.